Hello, everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. This is back to the Magic and Malice duology, as, I said last week. Also, for the record, the reason I'm doing this duology is because the trilogy of books that I will be following this up with are very, very big books, and with the holidays and a bunch of other things going on, you may notice down in the right corner the date. That with all of the stuff going on, I've kind of fallen behind on the books that I was intending to reread for this. So I picked these books because they're short and I've read them a million times, and even if I didn't reread them, I'd still be able to talk about them because I happen to adore these because, well, you can see my dust jacket. Anyways, also, you probably should see the cover of the book, but I'm not going to show it to you because that's plain black, but you'd be able to see how incredibly ragged this book is. Because I've read it umpty-squillion times, because I am a rereader. I am a person who reads books over and over and over again instead of reading new things, because God forbid I should act like a grown-up. So, this second book, Magician's Ward, is, as you may guess, the sequel to the first one, and this one picks up about a year after the last one ended. Basically, the last one ended with Kim saying, yes, I will be your ward, I will learn magic, and the thing is, becoming a proper real magician and living with a rich man in his rich person house with, thousands and thousands of pounds being handled by his family, who are literally minor nobility, and so on and so forth. His mother, after all, is a Lady Wendell, although Richard Merrill will not, in fact, become Lord anything because he is the younger son, and it is therefore due to the laws of primogeniture his older brother Andrew who would inherit things. For the record, Andrew in the first book, there's a whole thing about how Andrew was the one who handed Richard Merrill over to the Bow Street Runners on suspicion of him stealing stuff. So Andrew has a certain degree of persona non grata with Kim, but he doesn't show up really in this second book, so that's fine. So in the second book, this cover here is actually showing a specific moment in the books. The cover of the previous book was sort of showing the opening scene with Kim, but this one is a very, very specific actual moment in the book. Now, when this book starts, it starts a year later, but it leads directly from the last line of the previous book, which was that anything might happen, anything at all. And Kim, realizing that it's been a year, and Kim now realizes that anything might happen isn't really a thing that's going to happen, because the thing about being a student in Regency England in an alternate universe where magic is real is she's no longer on the streets, and so she's living in a home where she has to dress like the young woman that she is, and she's got lots and lots of lessons in reading and Latin and Greek. She's doing a lot of super basic spells, and it's really not that interesting. I mean, certainly she's grateful to have a roof over her head and 3 square meals a day and a whole bunch of other things like that. But she isn't having anything genuinely exciting happening. And what happens is that at first that we have our first serious tiff between her and Merlin has to do with the fact that Merlin's aunt, his Aunt Agatha, has showed up and is basically acting as a chaperone to make everything proper between them, and she is attempting to make Kim into a proper young lady and get her properly married, which is not a thing Kim is interested in because, well, she likes her freedom, and the whole point of becoming a magician would be to allow her freedom. But Agatha is grimly trying to make Kim into a proper lady, to shop her around in search of gentlemen who might marry her. And Kim deliberately winds up ruining one such effort of Aunt Agatha's by very deliberately throwing herself into her prior character of being, to throw herself into her prior character of a street rat, flinging herself hard into it in order to very specifically drive away this potential romantic partner. And so you have this very, very interesting effort on her part at Mrs. Hardcastle's, and what you have this moment where Mr. Fulton says, "I too have heard much about you, Miss Merrill. I must say it did not do you justice." And Kim very deliberately saying, "Don't go bitching me no gammon, you ain't heard near enough, because I'll lay you a monkey the gentry more ain't told you I was on the shop and lay a phone mail and took a fancy to adopt me." And she throws that out at him, which appalls everyone in the room, with the determination to drive him off. And the thing is that what Merlin does when several people in the room say, "Well, this is clearly dreadful and she is absolutely terrible," as he says, "Well, then we won't invite you to her coming out ball." And this disagreement between them stems from the fact that she didn't want a coming out ball. She didn't ask for a coming out ball. And yes, she was bored, and yes, she needed a change, but Merlin had unilaterally declared this was going to happen. And it takes her a minute to get through to him that the point is that he didn't ask her. And this is something that I think in a way informs part of their later exchanges in this book, that her attempts to get him to pay attention to her as a fellow adult, as a reasoning adult person who has wishes and wants to be treated as an equal, is that and a few other incidents are what sort of force him into looking at her as an adult, which is why by the end of the book he has fallen in love with her and actually gotten completely drunk once in an attempt to sort of not deal with the fact that he is potentially going to lose her. And the end of the book has this wonderful bit where he's so relieved she's all right that he kisses her, and his mother is telling him, "Yes, marrying your board is exactly the sort of usual scandal I was telling you should get involved in." And he suddenly realizes he's kissing her in public and is saying, "No, it won't happen again," because she doesn't want to get married to a toff. And Kim stares at him for a moment and then says, "Wait, this is what you were so... I was talking about the Marquis, not you." And they get engaged by the end of it. Throughout all of this book, though, there is an actual plot going on. The previous book was about Merlin trying to prove his innocence for the theft, and of course also capture and stop the people who had been behind the original theft and framed him for it. In this case, somebody is running around town stealing books, but is also in a connected situation. Another person is in effect stealing the magic of various witches hedge witch types, low-class people who don't have proper magical education but still have magical training, that these people, their magic has been effectively stolen. And Merlin, in trying to track this down, winds up having his magic stolen. And a large portion of this book is about the race being on to find out where his magic has gone, who's done it, and to make sure that he's okay. As well as Kim dealing with the fact that she is from the lower classes and is trying to maneuver among the upper classes whose ways are strange to her and who don't really see her as she's not one of them, and they don't really see her as a person, and she is uncomfortable with that. And in point of fact, when she turns down one proposal for marriage, she turns it down and has this conversation with this man who is a nice man and who was sincere in his offer, but she points out that you don't really see me, that sometimes you're impressed by me or sorry for me, but you're not interested in me. You're interested in how interesting my background is. And I don't want to be permanently married to somebody who isn't interested in the me as a person, but is interested in all of these other attachments to me. And it's a very interesting meditation on marriage and reasons for marriage, particularly in a society like Regency England, where her options are much more limited than a man's. And so, getting married to somebody because it is a great option for social and economic advancement is something that has to be very duly and carefully considered in her case, in a way that is perhaps sometimes alien to the modern reader. Now, obviously, you can get that kind of discussion in books that were actually properly written in the period. You can get that in Pride and Prejudice. But it's nonetheless an interesting meditation on her part on getting married, on why she wants to get married, on whether she wants to get married, and leads her to the realization that she wants to marry Merlin, Richard Merrill, who she never calls Mr. Merrill unless she absolutely has to because of social dictates, and never calls Richard. She calls him Merlin because that's who he was when she met him. That is, he was pretending to be Merlin the magician, a performer in the local Hungerford marketplace, earning pennies from the locals, which was sort of his cover. So, this book is somewhat less funny than the other one. There's a lot of funny in it, especially when Merlin's mother shows up with her monkey Maximilian, who was one of 3 monkeys, 2 of which died on the voyage, that were sent to her by somebody she knows in India who said that she should try the great delicacy of monkey brains. Richard Merrill's mother, Lady Wendell, is apparently extremely exotic in her tastes. There are some very dry words raised on the topic of one is hoping she will not repeat the experiment of curried snails in aspic. But this book is ultimately, I think, a little more serious, although just as fun and entertaining as the prior one. But it is a little more serious than the prior one. And I think that's everything that I have to say, at least before my time runs out. So, that is everything, and I will see you all next week.